Much.
Hey, we're back with more Live from the Heartland. We're here on WLUW 88.7, Chicago Sound Alliance. You can get us anywhere in the world at WLUW.org. And we're having a great time here today. We want to bring up our next guest, and that is the jazz guy, Mike Jeffers.
The jazz guy.
He is
Yeah, that's
the
it.
Chicago Jazz Magazine editor. He has a new book out on the infamous, the famed, the renowned Joe Siegel. And one of his favorite musicians is Ira Sullivan. We're going to get to all of that stuff.
Excellent.
Good morning to you, brother.
Good morning. Thanks for having me in. It's always a good time at 9:30 in the morning for a jazz guy to be on the air and alive,
You
right?
didn't play one of those late afternoon deals for people getting off work?
No, I used to do the Wonder Bar right down the street till 5 a.m., but I
Whoa.
retired from that gig a long time ago.
Lonnie is a good friend.
Oh,
I
she's
used
the
to
best.
do a gig at that one too. It's called Drinking after 2 a.m.
So you were a drummer, or you are a drummer.
I am a drummer, yeah.
And then you also were a publisher.
I'm a
So
publisher.
tell us a little bit of how you got into publishing this neat magazine.
Well, I came back from North Texas. I was down there, one of the top jazz schools in the world, and played all across the country and everything in the mid-'90s.
This guy looks to be about, I don't know, college.
Yeah, what is that school
Sorry.
called?
University of North Texas.
Yeah, because my kid had, when he was learning, one of my kids had guys out of North Texas teaching him.
Yeah, it was. I grew up here, and I went down there, and there was 4,000 jazz majors when I was down there. They had 10 big bands. It was insane, So
What's
I
the
was-
town?
Denton, Texas, the thriving metropolis of Denton, Texas.
Sweet.
5 minutes outside of town, there's a big steer ranch. It's
I know I'm
fantastic.
interrupting your answer to Michael's question, but did you grow up in Chicago?
I grew up in Des Plaines, actually.
Des Plaines,
just
close
outside.
enough.
Yeah, just
Right.
outside. So I came back and I was playing 6 nights a week, 7 nights a week, started teaching private lessons, and I realized that there was a lot of people in town that were rivaling the people in New York, because a lot of my friends that went to North Texas all went to New York, and they were telling me I should come out to New York and play in New York, and I'm like, I'm playing with like really serious players here in Chicago.
Right.
So in 1999, I didn't know anything about anything. I was playing gigs, doing everything. A buddy of mine who was doing computers, he actually was going to Loyola right here, he lived across the street, and he bought the domain michaeljeffers.com. He said, I got michaeljeffers.com, but I also got chicagojazz.com because that seems like a way better option than michaeljeffers.com. And I said, you are correct. I didn't know anything about it. It was 1999. AOL was still going boop, 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 zzz, zzz, and hooking up on the phone lines. Exactly. So that got me into the business realm. And when I started the business realm, I started reading all this stuff because I had to learn how to get traffic into that website. And it was funny because the first year I was the only one on chicagojazz.com. So I'd walk into Andy's and they'd always give me a lot of problems because they're like, oh, Mr. Chicago Jazz is here, because anytime you put chicagojazz.com in, my face would pop up. So then I started learning about business.
So
started
they
putting
gave you a
profiles.
hefty amount of grief.
Oh my God, yes, all the guys. But we got into that, and I started, trying to sell advertising. Started writing my own magazine online because I knew I had to start driving traffic. Now I didn't know anything about business. I got D's in English, everything. But I'm like, I have to drive traffic. I got to figure this out. I'd stay up all night writing articles and doing different things, doing interviews online. And then in 2002, I was trying to sell ads online, trying to do this stuff on chicagojazz.com, and at that point nobody knew anything about the internet when you were talking to clubs, because they had no idea. It's difficult to sell ads. So I went in and talked to a buddy of mine who was doing some publishing stuff. He said, why don't you publish a magazine, put it in print? And from the print aspect of it, I said, well, what does that entail? He goes, you just have to sell enough ads to pay for the printing. I'm like, well, okay. I didn't know anything, and I started doing it. I launched in 2002 at the Chicago Jazz Fest, and been cranking ever since. So that's the story of how I got
That's
into
pretty
that.
impressive for a youngster like yourself.
Let me ask you, do you know a guy named Steve Hashimoto?
Sure, I love Steve Hashimoto.
He does an online blog where he keeps everybody abreast of all the jazz musician news in general.
Right.
Then he always tries to sell a few books or things he has laying around. He's a wonderful guy. We go way back to Rising Up Angry days, but I'm glad you know him, and people should look up that name, Steve Hashimoto.
He does his weekly News from the Trenches.
News from the
Is
Trenches.
what the name of that email is, and he's a great guy, and we post some of that stuff on chicagojazz.com, and he's always a really great resource because I don't know how he knows everybody in the world, but he knows everybody in the world. So
Well, he's older than you.
Well, just slightly.
So from the magazine to a book, you collaborated with Joe Siegel, who's has run the Jazz Showcase and all that.
Yep.
Just celebrated his 92nd birthday.
Yep.
And unfortunately, he's in the hospital, I understand.
Well, he's in and out of rehab a little bit. He's having some health problems, but hopefully he's going to rebound here shortly and be back behind the desk over at the Jazz Showcase. But yeah, I mean, I've known him, since I was a teenager, going in there to see shows. And when I started publishing the magazine, he was always really supportive and always gave me plenty of tips on who I should be covering, in the magazine. So,
I first met him at the. He was at the Jazz Record Mart down on Wabash, and I remember Mike Bloomfield and Charlie Musselwhite were hanging out there. This was in the early '60s.
Yeah.
I actually want to share a quick story that because I know you're a fan of Ira Sullivan.
Yep.
And when I was a sophomore in college in 1962 at Lake Forest, I read an article in Downbeat on reverse prejudice in jazz called Crow Jim, and it cited Ira Sullivan as having played with Charlie Parker, but he couldn't get work. So I went down to interview him somewhere in Old Town,
White guys not
and
getting work.
I had a sport jacket and a tie on. I think they were probably stoned or something, but I remember asking him a lot of questions, and he dismissed that whole thing. But he's a regular guy. He moved from saxophone to trumpet back and forth. He comes to Chicago, and he's one of your favorites.
Well, he's one of my favorites just because when I came back from North Texas, I did a clinic with him, and these older guys, I don't know how it is nowadays, and I'm not one to give people advice because I'm in and out a lot of places, but when I would hang out at jam sessions, Ira and all these older guys would definitely tell me what tunes I needed to know, tell me how bad I was playing, tell me, I better get my act together. So it was really one of those things that Ira was one of those guys. But, Ira, there's a picture in Joe Siegel's book. When Joe asked me to do the book when I was walking into the showcase, he had pitched it to different publishing companies, and the different publishing companies didn't want to print it with a lot of pictures. They wanted just stories and text. And he asked me if I knew about publishing, and I said, well, I don't know. I publish a magazine. I suppose I know a little bit about it, but, So I had a meeting with him, and the first meeting I had with him, he walks in, and Joe's notorious. He has no cell phone. He has no computer. So he walked in. He had 88 pages of typed text on pieces of paper, and then random pieces of paper, and then like 500 pictures in a big bag. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh my God. So we started going through it, and in this book, speaking of Ira Sullivan, in this book, there's a picture of Ira, Charlie Parker, Bruz Freeman, Von Freeman, the legendaries Von Freeman, George Freeman, who's
We had George on last week.
Yeah,
This afternoon.
and George's brother Bruz played drums. So there's pictures of Ira and Charlie Parker in there from down at one of the clubs downtown. I can't remember which one, but it's on the south side. So it's real interesting, so it all kind of comes back full circle, when we're talking about this book, too, that Joe put together. I mean, I learned so much about jazz history by doing this book. I spent 2 years with Joe, picking him up, bringing him down to the showcase. We'd go and hang out at the Dearborn Station in that little cave behind and work for 4 or 5 hours at a time. And as we got closer, it came out at the Jazz Fest this past September. And as we got closer to the deadline, I had to push him, so I saw him probably 3-4 times a week for hours, and the stories he's got, it's unbelievable. There's half of the stories he has are not in this book.
So this book is by Joe Siegel, but you helped produce it.
Yes. Well, he wrote 95% of the copy in this. I edited, I put things together like that, organized it, made suggestions.
Were you an English major?
No. I was getting D's in
covered
English.
that.
See, that's the problem, right? I can't. So, so I published it through my company, Chicago Jazz Publishing and Entertainment. So we have ChicagoJazz.com, the print magazine, Chicago Jazz Magazine, Chicago Jazz Entertainment, which is my corporate booking site that I do all the corporate stuff and everything else. And so that's how it all kind of came about with that.
So we're gonna do a little musical break here with Ira Sullivan, and we're gonna just come back to our interview with Mike right after that break. You're listening to Live from the Heartland.
Little Ira Sullivan with We're about ready to hear a little bit of Dante Luciani on the trombone. This was a really nice time looking up all this music. And we're talking with Mike Jeffers of Chicago Jazz and his book that he collaborated with Joe Siegel. The name of the book, Stay On It.
Stay on it.
A personalized journal of new jazz master Joe Siegel during his 70-plus years of musical endeavors.
I hope he's listening in this, wherever he's hanging out getting well.
You know, in the book, one of the pictures, a few pictures of a former customer of ours, Cy Toof,
Yeah.
trombone player, the late great.
Our old neighbor.
I have a picture he took of a bee at the Heartland.
You too.
When people ask you where to listen to jazz today in Chicago, where do you send them first?
Well, I mean, you know, obviously, we look and think back to the 70s, right, and 80s and stuff when Rush Street was smashed with clubs and all that. It's not like that anymore, but obviously you got the Jazz Showcase, you've got the Green Mill, Dave Gemla killing it up there still, Andy's Jazz Club, Chris, the Scotty's sons took it over and they're doing a killer job, 7 nights a week jazz there. And then there's Winter's Jazz Club, right, in Streeterville, right on Grand and McClure Court, and he's doing jazz 6 nights a week. He's got a great wine bar and all that. So those are like the 4 main spots. Of course, the Hyde Park Jazz Society has an incredible Sunday night jazz series that happens at Room 43 every Sunday night. And then, of course, the festivals and all the different pop-up things and all those different things all over the place are always happening. So, of course, we have all the information at chicagojazz.com. And then if anybody tunes in, what I started doing about 2 years ago, I started doing a weekly video show called Chicago Jazz This Week, which we're transitioning over. I'm on my episode 100 now. And that's on chicagojazz.com, where I interview people. I live in Bridgeport, so I take them over to a hot dog stand in Bridgeport and I interview them, and it's all on video and everything. So that drops every week. And of course, we're doing a lot of different club things now with video on chicagojazz.com. And we also published the official program book for the Chicago Blues Fest. That's coming up, and I know I was talking to Lynn Orman here a little bit earlier, so we've got a lot of blues stuff happening since we're getting into the blues season, and it all kind of ties together, the blues and jazz stuff. So ChicagoJazz.com, everything's on there, but of course, those 4 main clubs are the ones that I always tell people to check out first.
So are you glad that you stayed here instead of going to New York?
Yeah, I mean, I go to New York a lot, and it's a great place to visit for like a week and then come back, because it's like, you know, it's intense. So I like going out there, but I think that here for musicians, there's more work and you can make more money here than in New York.
That's
you know?
fascinating.
I mean, I've played in New York a bunch, and you fly in, you play the gig, play the Blue Note. I played the Blue Note and Iridium and all those places. And then you fly back out, and the guys that are there are playing there for a lot less money. There's a lot less gigs because there's so many people there. And a lot of those guys get their chops together in New York, but then they make their money when they go out and they tour. So I have a lot of.
Well, that's true with all the, even the DIY, you know, the young rock and roll bands.
Yep.
I've got a kid in Twin Peaks, and the money's on the road where they sell the merch and, you know, that kind of thing. They work hard. I'm sure it's true for jazz musicians too.
Oh yeah, 100%. You know, 100%. I mean, it's amazing. One of the favorite spots I love in New York is 55 Bar, which is right in the Village. And you go in there, and I mean, it's incredible who's playing in there. It's unbelievable. Where they play at Symphony Center here, they're playing at 55 Bar. It costs like $5 to get in, and there's like, it's a half full, but they're getting their chops together, and then they leave, and then they go and play Symphony Center and make their money. You know?
Do they still have the Village Vanguard? Or
Oh,
is
yeah.
that's still going?
Yep.
I saw John Coltrane there.
That's
way back.
actually, the Jazz Showcase is the second oldest club in the world, and the Village Vanguard is one of the first. I think that's the first. So it's interesting. And Joe knew the owner, and his picture's in there of the Village Vanguard with Joe. So.
No, I remember seeing Aretha Franklin too when she was, say, 18 or 19. I was with some Columbia record A&R guys
Oh yeah.
as a young guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing who you run into out there. But, you know, Chicago's so vibrant, man. I mean, there's so many killing players here. It's unbelievable. And there's such a young jazz scene happening here in Chicago, too, you know. I mean, like Micaiah McCraven, he's touring all over Europe. His name is blowing up. And, I mean, he's just in his 30s, to late 20s, 30s.
Thanks to having Lynn Orman Weiss as a co-producer, we do get to see some of these musicians from time to time on this exact show. And,
You know, here in
we're
Chicago
grateful.
too, we have the Jazz Institute.
That's
And
right.
our good friend Lauren Deutsch has just retired. So do you guys have a relationship with the Jazz Institute?
Yeah, actually on the back page of the
Yeah, I got a whole
one,
page
I did a
of
whole
Lauren.
interview with Lauren, and I've got a whole podcast that we're going to be dropping with Lauren. She's great. I mean, when I first started the magazine, the print magazine, 16 years ago, They were real supportive of it, and they always have been. And you know, it's interesting because there's so many different organizations for jazz in Chicago that are happening, and all of them have different missions, and none of them are really like competing against each other. So, you know, I mean, for me, since I'm like a media company, I try to get everybody just getting me the stuff and try to be the central organizing field of that, you know, that stuff. But there's so many things going on. I mean, you know, like Jazz Institute, you know, Lauren, I mean, for everything she's done over the years and all that, she has something going on every single week.
And she takes some great photographs, too.
And she's also being honored. She just got mentioned in some honor. I can't remember the name of it. She's up for, or receiving an award, and I couldn't be happier for her.
Mike Jeffers, I'm always curious to know how you chose that instrument. I mean, I chose the trumpet because Harry James. I figured, oh yeah, I'll play. A lot of kids start they like drums, but what was the thing that drove you to the drums?
Well, I mean, my parents didn't want me to play them, so I guess maybe that's part of it.
That's a good reason.
They put me on violin and trumpet and everything else, and I'm like, man, I would fail out of everything, and finally I got a drum. So I think, you know, I used to listen to, you know, I grew up in the 80s. I mean, I was born in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s. So, I mean, I really was into, like, Led Zeppelin, John Bonham, that kind of stuff.
Great drums.
I mean, it was killer, right? And you would hear that groove, you'd hear that beat, that thumping, but when I got into high school, I didn't take lessons or anything, didn't even start playing like serious practicing drums until I was like junior to senior year when I started taking lessons at Oakton Community College with this Jake Jerger, who was like a legendary guy who was in the Slingerland Drum Company with Gene Krupa and everything.
Nice.
And he showed me a video or something one time of Louis Bellson, the double bass and all that, because I was like, I could not believe what I was watching. And then I was lucky enough 3 years later, I actually played a concert with Louis. And then when I came back from North Texas, I did a clinic with Louis at Ravinia, and that's how I ended up getting private lesson things up in the North Shore. And so Louis, I ended up doing like 4 or 5 concerts with him and all that. You know, he invented the double bass drum. So, you know, when he was playing with Ellington, it was insane. But when I saw that, I was like, whoa. So you combine like John Bonham, and you combine like, you know, some of the other drummers that I love, and then you see Louis Bellson playing. It's like, my God, that's it. I'm in. Done, you know. And then it's 20 below zero, and I'm lugging my drums in and out of my car. I'm not thinking it's such a good idea anymore, but I was already in, you know.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's great. So, what is the most exciting aspect currently? What is new and great about the jazz scene in Chicago and beyond? And you know, talk about how relevant the Jazz Fest in Chicago can be or is. That's at the end or the beginning of the summer? I forget.
End of the summer.
It's at the end, yeah.
We have
Blues
Blues
is
Fest in
first.
about a month.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
After
yeah.
Gospel Fest.
That's
Right.
right. That's right. And Blues Fest is second weekend of June, and of course, if anybody wants to stop by and see me, I'll be at my booth in Millennium Park. But
Sweet. Thank
same
you.
thing with Jazz Fest. Jazz Fest, actually, they extended Jazz Fest because it's the 40th annual Jazz Fest, so it's going to be like the 24th of August all the way until September 2nd.
We like this.
So they are going to like really cram a bunch of stuff in there. They're
Wow, will that ever be a mellow week in Chicago?
oh man, and they're trying to include all the clubs too. I work with the city because I do the program books for them. So they're really dialing a lot of different facets and trying to get it more like a Toronto Jazz Fest where it's
Nice.
combining all the different clubs and all the different things.
Excellent.
From my standpoint, I think one of the most exciting things with jazz is something that I started doing online, which, you know, everybody's doing stuff online now, but it's the way they're taking the digital exposure online with jazz now. So like, you know, when I was growing up and I went to North Texas, I'd have to go to a listening library, I'd have to sit there and listen to all this stuff. Now, man, you know, like what you guys are playing off of YouTube,
Right.
it's amazing what the kids are learning. So
Yeah.
you know, it's that younger generation, but then when you get online, they're taking the digital aspect of it. By that I mean, you know, they're filming, they're shooting live performances, they're running Facebook Live when they're playing at Andy's, when they're playing at Winters. So, you know,
If you had an instrument, we'd be doing Facebook Live with you too.
so-
We didn't have room.
You know,
for
one of
it.
the Chicago great jazz guys, Ramsey Lewis, is retiring. Is he going to cover that in your mag, or have you already done that?
well, we did a feature with Ramsey. I'm thinking Randy. I don't know why I'm saying it.
No, Ramsey Lewis.
It's too early in the morning. Ramsey Lewis, probably about 10 years ago. So I'm sure we're going to cover something on him and everything. His son works for the city of Chicago.
Yeah, his
so
son
it
and my
all comes
kid took
together.
lessons together in high school, I remember.
Oh,
at
yeah.
the city program.
Okay, yeah. He's a great guy. He's always been supportive of the magazine, and I mean, you know, when he says he's going to retire, we'll see what that
I
means.
hope he does. Keep
Yeah.
going.
Mike Jeffers, we could go on with you, except we've run out of time. So check out Chicago Jazz Magazine. Look for Stay On It, the book about and by Joe Siegel, and a lot of jazz history in there. It's a good looking
And you got
book.
podcasts too?
Podcast, ChicagoJazz.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. You can find me everywhere.
We're going to use you
He
as our
knows it
advisor.
all. We're going to go out to Amsterdam After Dark. We want to thank our guests, Pete Makovicki, Sushma Reddy, and Mike Jeffers. Next week we got Nicole Hallander and Dee Ryan. We've also want to thank our music producer and many other things producer, Lynn Orman. We want to thank each other, Michael, Tom, Dan Kugler, who does our web, and Andrew Moreno, our engineer today and many days now. And we wish Diamond Gant a successful finals.
Yes.
Do good in the world. The
The world needs all the good you do.
All power
All
to the
power
people.
to the people. Over and out.